Nothing physical emerged when the portal opened in 1972. But every human being on Earth felt it instantly. A sudden void, as if someone had reached into their mind and scooped out something vital. You couldn't remember what you'd lost. You couldn't even articulate why the absence hurt so much. You just knew that something fundamental was gone. The astronauts who activated the portal? They went catatonic immediately. Brain scans showed patterns neuroscientists could only describe as searching, their minds desperately hunting for something that had been deleted from human consciousness entirely. When researchers finally understood what the portal had done, the truth was horrifying. It hadn't brought anything through, it had taken something away. The portal had stolen our understanding of mortality itself. Not killed anyone, just removed the very concept of death from every human brain simultaneously. And without that concept, civilization began to collapse. People stopped sleeping because they no longer understood their bodies needed rest. They stopped eating because they couldn't comprehend starvation. And when they began dying from these failures, nobody understood what was happening. The framework for understanding death itself was simply gone. For 52 years, governments have hidden this collapse. They've manufactured explanations for why people need to sleep and eat, without admitting that humanity lost the instinctive understanding of why these things matter. They've covered up the fact that every human born since 1972 lacks a fundamental piece of consciousness. And according to the entity that finally responded to scientists' attempts at communication, death was just the first piece. It takes one concept per year, one fundamental human understanding erased from our collective consciousness annually. We've lost 52 crucial concepts without knowing what most of them were, slowly becoming a species that can no longer understand its own existence. That's what they told me anyway. I'm Theodore Brennan. 3 weeks ago, I was a senior archivist at the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston, cataloging declassified Apollo-era documents. Normal work, boring work, safe work. Now I'm sitting in a concrete room beneath the Nevada desert, watching my own hands shake as I try to write everything down before I forget how to hold a pen. They showed me the footage, the real footage from Apollo 17, not the broadcast version, but the 17 minutes that got cut and buried so deep that finding it nearly cost me everything. I saw what Eugene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt actually discovered in the Taurus-Littrow Valley. I understand now why they've been lying for 5 decades. The portal is still open. It never closed. And tonight, at exactly 11:47 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, another concept disappears forever. I don't know which one. None of us do. But I need you to understand this before it's gone. Before we're all gone. Before we become something so fundamentally different that the word human loses all meaning. 3 weeks ago, I was arguing with a vending machine. Building 30 at Johnson Space Center has this ancient Pepsi machine that's been broken since the Clinton administration. Everyone knows the trick. Hit it twice on the left side, wait 3 seconds, then press your selection. I'd done it 1,000 times. But that Tuesday afternoon, my knuckles were bruised, my $1.75 was gone, and I was genuinely considering filing an official complaint against a piece of equipment older than most of the interns. It helps if you apologize to it first. I turned around. A man in his 60s stood in the hallway, wearing a visitor badge and a rumpled sport coat that looked expensive sometime during the Reagan years. His hair was military short and white. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare you see in combat veterans, like they're always looking at something just past your shoulder, something you can't see. Apologize, I repeated. Machine's been here since '74. It's earned some respect. He walked over and patted the vending machine like it was an old dog. Sorry for the trouble, friend. Then he pressed the button for a Sprite. The can dropped with a cheerful thunk. That's ridiculous, I said. Most true things are. He handed me the Sprite. You're Theodore Brennan, senior archivist, Apollo Document Reclamation Project. I didn't take the can. And you are? Walter Gideon. I used to work in the building you're not supposed to know exists. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. I need you to find something for me, Theodore. Something that got misfiled about 50 years ago. Something people have died trying to expose. The Johnson Space Center sprawls across 1,600 acres of former Texas cattle ranch. Most visitors only see the public face, the Saturn V rocket lying on its side, the replica shuttle, the gift shop selling freeze-dried ice cream. But underneath that sanitized exterior, there are miles of corridors connecting buildings that don't appear on any official map. I'd worked in the archives for 11 years, and I still occasionally discovered doors I'd never noticed before. Walter Gideon led me to one of them. The document was originally filed under Apollo 17 geological surveys. He explained as our footsteps echoed off institutional green walls. Surface sample analysis, regolith composition reports, boring stuff. That's why nobody looked at it for decades. What changed? Someone did look at it. About 6 months ago, a young researcher named Douglas Whitmore, working on his dissertation about lunar mineralogy. He requested the original documentation for sample 76535, troctolite, they called it. Ancient lunar rock, 4 billion years old, completely unremarkable. I remember that sample, I said. It's in the display case upstairs. That's a replica. Walter stopped at a steel door with no handle, just a keypad. The real sample was removed from the collection in January 1973 and transferred to a facility in Nevada, along with everything else they brought back from Taurus-Littrow, the stuff they didn't show anyone. The room beyond was small, maybe 10 feet square, lined with filing cabinets that looked older than me. A single fluorescent tube buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow light. The air tasted stale, recycled too many times. Douglas found a discrepancy in the documentation. Walter continued, pulling open a cabinet drawer. The sample weights didn't match. According to official records, sample 76535 weighed 156 grams when collected, but the transfer manifest from 73 listed it at 312 grams, exactly double. Clerical error. That's what Douglas thought. So he went looking for the original field notes, the handwritten logs from Schmidt and Cernan. Walter pulled out a manila folder, yellowed with age. He found them. And then he found something else, something that had been slipped between the pages and forgotten for half a century. He handed me the folder. The tab read, TL7 Contact Report. Eyes only. What's TL7? I asked. Taurus-Littrow Site 7, the location where Cernan and Schmidt stopped their rover on December 13, 1972. Officially, they collected soil samples and photographed a boulder field. Walter's voice dropped. Unofficially, open it? I did. The first page was a photograph, black and white, grainy like all Apollo photos. It showed the lunar surface, grey dust, scattered rocks, the black sky above, and in the center of the frame, something that shouldn't have been there. A doorway, not a cave, not a shadow. A perfectly rectangular opening in the ground, with edges too sharp to be natural, too precise to be random. The photograph had a time stamp. December 13th, 1972, 14:47, 03 GMT. That's not possible, I whispered. Douglas Whitmore said the same thing. He made copies of everything in this folder, the photographs, the field notes, the transmission logs. He was going to take them to the press. Was. Walter's expression didn't change. Douglas Whitmore was found dead in his apartment 3 days later. Coroner ruled it a stroke. He was 26 years old. Non-smoker. Ran marathons. He took the folder from my hands. The copies he made were never found. The fluorescent light flickered once, then twice. In the silence between buzzes, I could hear my own heartbeat. What do you want from me, Mr. Gideon? I want you to find what Douglas found. The complete file. Everything NASA buried about what happened at Taurus-Littrow. He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw genuine fear behind that veteran stare. And I want you to understand what we've been hiding before midnight tonight, because at 11:47 p.m. something else disappears from human consciousness. And I don't know if we'll still be able to read after it's gone. Walter drove a 1987 Ford pickup that smelled like cigarettes and regret. We took Interstate 45 north out of Houston, the skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror until it was just a smudge of light against October darkness. Douglas kept a storage unit in Conroe. Walter said, eyes fixed on the road. Paid for it in cash under a fake name. Smart kid. Paranoid, but smart. How do you know about it? Because I taught him to be paranoid. Walter reached into his coat and pulled out a pack of Marlboros. Douglas was my grandson. The admission hung in the air between us. I watched him light the cigarette, the flame illuminating deep lines around his mouth I hadn't noticed before. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. Being sorry doesn't change anything. He cracked the window, letting smoke curl into the night. I spent 40 years working for an agency that doesn't officially exist, doing things I can't officially talk about. When Douglas told me what he'd found, I should have told him to forget it. Burn the copies. Delete the files. Go back to writing about moon rocks. The cigarette trembled between his fingers. Instead, I helped him dig deeper. I thought maybe, after 50 years, people deserved to know the truth. Know what? Walter didn't answer. We drove in silence for 20 more minutes, passing strip malls and gas stations, all the ordinary landmarks of suburban Texas. Finally, he pulled off onto a service road winding through scrubby forest. A self-storage facility emerged from the darkness. Rows of corrugated metal buildings behind chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Unit 247, Walter said, killing the engine. Douglas rented it 8 months ago. I've got the key, but I've never been inside. Couldn't bring myself to do it alone. The facility was deserted at this hour. Our footsteps crunched on gravel as we passed identical orange doors. Unit 247 was tucked in a corner where security lights didn't quite reach. Walter's hand shook as he worked the padlock. The door rolled up with a screech of metal. A smell washed over us, paper and dust and something chemical. Formaldehyde, maybe. Walter found the light switch. A single bulb flickered to life, revealing a space the size of a one-car garage. Every inch of wall was covered with papers, photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, hand-drawn diagrams connected by red string. It looked like a conspiracy theorist's lair, except this particular conspiracy appeared to be real. My God, Walter whispered. He found it. He found all of it. One wall was dedicated entirely to Apollo 17, mission timelines, crew biographies, orbital trajectories. Another focused on something called Sightcapper, a facility in the Nevada desert, surrounded by empty scrubland with no identifying markers. But it was the center of the room that drew my attention. A table sat beneath the light bulb, covered with a plastic tarp. Something was underneath. Something roughly the size and shape of a human body. Walter. He saw it too. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Walter walked over and pulled back the tarp. It wasn't a body. It was a model. A three-dimensional recreation of the lunar surface, built with painstaking detail from grey clay and painted foam. The Taurus-Littrow Valley stretched out in miniature. Craters, boulder fields, rover tracks, and in the center, the doorway. Douglas had recreated it perfectly. A rectangular opening, perhaps 2 meters wide and 3 meters tall, with edges that caught the light in ways that made them seem sharper than reality. He'd painted the interior black, not just dark, but absolute absence of light that swallowed everything. He was trying to understand the geometry. Walter said distantly, "The doorway doesn't make sense. The proportions are wrong for any human architecture. The angles don't conform to Euclidean principles. Douglas spent months trying to figure out what kind of intelligence would build something like this. I leaned closer, studying notations written on the clay, measurements, calculations, references to papers I'd never heard of. What did he conclude? That it wasn't built, it was grown. Walter pointed to papers stacked on the table corner. His notes are there. He believed the doorway was a biological structure, something dormant beneath the lunar surface for millions of years. Waiting. Waiting for what? For us to wake it up. Vibration. The rover's wheels. The astronaut's footsteps. Any physical disturbance would be enough. Walter's voice dropped. The moon is seismically dead, Theodore. It hasn't had internal activity for 3 billion years. The surface is a perfect insulator, preserving whatever lies beneath in suspended animation. Until we came along and started stomping around. I picked up Douglas's notes, flipping through dense handwriting and diagrams. Then I found the transcript, a communication log dated January 4th, 1973, 3 weeks after Apollo 17 splashed down. The header identified it as a transmission received at the Deep Space Network facility in Goldstone, California. The source was listed as coordinates on the lunar surface. The coordinates for Site 7, the doorway. They received a signal, I said. Not a signal, a response. Walter took the transcript. We sent a radio pulse toward the doorway. Prime numbers, mathematical constants, the usual first contact protocol. And something answered. Walter turned to the last page of the transcript. It asked us a question. One question, translated into 17 different human languages simultaneously, broadcast across every frequency we were monitoring. I read the words, printed in neat typewriter font, centered on an otherwise blank sheet. What is the purpose of ending? We didn't know what it meant. Walter said. The best minds in the country spent months trying to interpret it. Was it asking about death, about goals, about the heat death of the universe? Nobody could agree. He set the transcript down. And then on January 15th, 1973, at exactly 11:47 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, every person on Earth forgot what death was. The fluorescent bulb buzzed and flickered. In the silence, I became aware of a sound I hadn't noticed before. A low hum, barely audible, coming from somewhere beneath our feet. Walter, do you hear that? He nodded slowly, his face pale. It's been getting louder for 6 months. Douglas noticed it first. He thought it was electrical interference, but the frequency doesn't match any known source. He looked down as if he could see through concrete. It's coming from the west, from Nevada, from Site Kappa, from what's inside Site Kappa. Walter pulled the tarp back over the model. They didn't just study photographs, Theodore. In 1974, a classified mission retrieved the doorway itself and transported it to a facility in the Nevada desert. It's been there ever since, buried under 200 feet of concrete and steel. And it's humming. It's been humming for 50 years. But lately... He stopped, head tilting as if listening. Lately it's been humming louder, like it's getting ready to open again. The light flickered. In the moment of darkness, I could have sworn I saw something move in the corner, something that wasn't there when the light returned. Walter grabbed my arm. We need to go. Now! We made it halfway across the parking lot before Walter collapsed. One moment he was walking beside me, breathing ragged but steady. The next, his legs buckled, and he went down hard, knees hitting gravel with a sickening crack. I caught him before his head struck the ground. Walter! Walter, talk to me! His eyes were open but unseeing, fixed on something above us. The sky, maybe, or something beyond it. His lips moved without sound, forming words I couldn't read. I'm calling an ambulance. No! His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. No hospitals. They're watching the hospitals. They're watching everything. His grip tightened, fingernails digging into my skin. Listen to me. The file, Douglas's file, there's a name. Bertram Holloway. He was project director at Site Kappa until 1989. He knows everything. Find him. He lives in... Walter's body went rigid. His back arched off the ground, heels drumming against gravel. A sound came from his throat that I'll never forget. A high, keening wail that bypassed my ears and resonated in the center of my skull. And then I felt it. The absence. It was like someone reached into my head and removed a piece of furniture I'd walked past every day without noticing. Suddenly there was empty space where something important used to be. I knew with absolute certainty that I had lost something vital, but the knowledge of what I'd lost was part of what had been taken. Walter stopped seizing. His body relaxed, eyes drifting closed. For a horrible moment I thought he was dead, but his chest still rose and fell. His pulse still beat beneath my fingers. Walter. His eyes opened. He looked at me with profound confusion, like a man waking in a country where he didn't speak the language. "Who are you?" he asked. "It's Theodore. Theodore Brennan. We were just in the storage unit. You were telling me about Site Kappa." "Storage unit?" Walter repeated the words slowly, testing them. I don't know what that means." "A place where you keep things. A building." He shook his head, face contorting with frustration. "I know what the words mean. I just don't understand why someone would do that. Why would you put things in a building? What's the purpose?" "Walter, what year were you born?" 1952. "I know facts, son. I remember facts just fine." He struggled to sit up. "But I can't remember why any of them matter. I can't remember what any of this is for." He gestured at the storage facility, at the trucks, at the entire infrastructure of civilization. "All of this, what's the point?" I understood then what the portal had taken at 11:47 tonight. Purpose. The concept of purpose itself. I helped Walter to his feet and guided him to the truck. He moved like a sleepwalker, compliant but uncomprehending, eyes sliding over the world without grasping any of it. When I buckled his seatbelt, he watched my hands with mild curiosity, as if I were performing some elaborate ritual whose significance escaped him. I drove west. The interstate stretched ahead, a river of concrete flowing into darkness. Somewhere around Abilene, Walter started talking again. "I remember my grandson," he said distantly. "Douglas. I remember teaching him to fish when he was 7. I remember the phone call when they told me he was dead." Tears streamed down his cheeks that he didn't seem to notice. "But I don't remember why any of it mattered. I don't remember why I cared." "You loved him." Love. Walter tasted the word. "I know what love is. Chemical response, social bonding mechanism. But I don't remember why I would want it. I don't remember what it was supposed to accomplish. Walter, I need you to focus. Before it happened, you mentioned a name. Bertram Holloway, project director at Site Kappa. Where does he live? Truth or consequences?" Walter almost smiled. "That's the name of a town in New Mexico. Used to be called Hot Springs, but they changed it for a radio show in 1950. Strange thing to do. But I suppose everything people do is strange when you think about it. All these elaborate structures, and I can't remember what any of it was supposed to achieve." I found Bertram Holloway's address in Douglas's notes, a small adobe house on a street named after a conquistador 3 blocks from the Rio Grande. The man who answered was ancient, 90 at least, skin like brown paper stretched over kindling. But his eyes were sharp behind thick glasses. He looked at me, then at Walter, and something shifted in his expression. "So it finally happened," he said. "I wondered when they'd send someone. Nobody sent me. My name is Theodore Brennan. I know who you are. You're the archivist who found the TL7 file." Bertram stepped aside, gesturing into a living room cluttered with books and papers. "I've been waiting for you for 6 months, ever since Douglas Whitmore died." Inside, Bertram explained everything. The doorway wasn't a portal. It was an antenna. The thing on the other side wasn't an alien in any recognizable sense. It was pure consciousness, pure concept, existing as information itself. It had been broadcasting into our solar system for 4 billion years, waiting for someone to pick up the signal. When Cernan and Schmidt activated the doorway, they didn't open a portal, Bertram said. They answered the phone. And the thing on the other end has been talking to us ever since, learning our language, mapping our consciousness, stealing pieces of it year by year. Not stealing, Bertram corrected himself. Trading. With each concept it takes, our minds become less human and more compatible with its way of thinking. Eventually, we'll understand what it's been trying to tell us. How do we stop it? Bertram's laugh was dry and papery. There's only one way. The doorway doesn't broadcast randomly, it's targeted. It's been talking to one specific mind since 1972. Harrison Schmitt, the astronaut who first touched it. As long as he lives, the antenna has a target. Kill Harrison Schmitt, and the doorway goes silent. The words hung obscenely in the air. You're talking about murdering a 90-year-old man. I'm talking about the choice the government has refused to make for 52 years. Bertram's eyes were hard. Douglas was going to expose everything. Someone decided his life was worth less than Schmidt's. I found Schmitt in Silver City, New Mexico. When I confronted him, he didn't deny anything. He told me the intelligence wasn't malevolent, it was trying to share something with us. Eternity. Connection. An end to loneliness and separation. All we had to do was let go of our humanity. But I couldn't, I wouldn't. Now, 6 months later, I sit in the archives watching the world change around me. The thefts continue. One concept every night at 11:47. Last month, nostalgia. The month before, anticipation. Small losses that add up. But I've realized something the intelligence doesn't understand. Our mortality isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's what makes us human. The knowledge that we'll end is what gives our moments meaning. The certainty of death is what makes life precious. The doorway is still open. The exchange continues. But for the first time in 52 years, we're not just being changed. We're changing them too.